Hi, I'm Jane Wells with CEOs You Should Know, and you are Jeff Dailey, CEO of Farmers Insurance.
I am.
How big's the company?
A little over $20 billion in revenue and about 20,000 employees.
How old?
91 years this year.
It's called Farmers. Was it originally for farmers?
No, it's an interesting story. So it started in downtown Los Angeles, and we used, I should say they at the time, used farmers as part-time sales agents. And that's where the name came from.
How long have you been CEO with the company?
A little over 7 years.
Where are you from?
Originally from Detroit. Went to college at Wisconsin, got out and went to grad school also at Wisconsin for my MBA. And while I was there, I was going to get married, and I thought I needed a job, and claims adjusting was a perfect job for me to be able to set a schedule and continue to go to school. And I thought as soon as I was done with my MBA, I would leave, and here, almost 40 years later, I am still in insurance.
What was your first claim? Do you remember?
Very well. So my first claim was one school bus rear-ended another school bus, 85 injuries. So that was my very first claim.
How old were you?
22 or 23.
What was that like, walking up to 2 school buses and 85 injuries?
Well, it was actually worse than that, because the school buses had moved by the time I was involved, but I had to actually go to, I want to say 45 different homes, meet the families of people whose kids were not very injured to people that had broken bones and things. So it was tough.
You owned your own business for a while.
No, I didn't. I started a company. It was founded by, I should say, I founded it, but the money was somebody else's money. So I owned a little bit of it, but not very much.
What was that like?
It was actually, I would say, might have been my most fun job, because I had to do a little bit of everything.
What brought you to Farmers?
They bought me.
Was your goal from day one at Farmers to be the boss?
Yeah, I would say it was the first time in my career outside of the company I started that I ever really had a goal about being the CEO. So having been a CEO of a small public company, which was Bristol West, the idea of going into a big company and not being the CEO was probably something that wouldn't have worked very well for me. So that was my goal. The
2007 fire seemed to be a real turning point in terms of the visibility of insurers, especially Farmers being out there where people were. Farmers was very much out there writing checks.
Right. We actually pride ourselves on disaster events, so I think we would say this, and if you had some other insurance company CEOs, and they may disagree with me, but if we weren't first, we were really close to first to bring big, huge mobile catastrophe vans to that. And we want our customers to know that, and that's the worst thing that can happen, right, is one of these horrific events that kicks you out of your home and you've lost everything you've had. But we want there, and we want to have a big presence, and we really want to do that better than anybody. We've actually just upgraded our cat buses to, we now have a tractor trailer, and the trailer opens up into an 800 square foot office that we'll put down. And while we're doing that, we've got barbecue grills, we're cooking food for people, we're bringing places where people can plug in their phones and charge things. The bigger exposure for us is what's happened the last 2 years is really the fires that we've had, primarily in Northern California, but even actually down here, the Wolseley fire was very close. We watched it from our office burn for a week.
Did you have employees who were impacted by it?
Yeah, well,
Did you have to evacuate?
Yeah, I was evacuated for 4 days. Luckily, my house was still there, but I was out for 4 days. I think the big problem for the last couple of years has really been the mismanagement of the utilities, especially PG&E, and I think that management team, I hate to talk bad about anybody, but that really has been the problem there. I think with the state exercising more control with a new management team, a lot of the fires that have happened were preventable. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that we are not going to have a couple of years like that. The problem with the FAIR plan is the insurance companies subsidize the FAIR plan, so if everybody moves to the FAIR plan, we've just moved our risk from one pocket to the other, which won't help that much. I think if we don't get a handle, and I think we will, but if we don't get a handle on fires, I think you're going to have to start thinking about a wildfire authority like there's a California Earthquake Authority, because it will be a risk that's just uninsurable.
How do you manage your own employees and their own emotional reaction to these big disasters?
That's a really good question, and one people probably wouldn't think of a lot, because it really does take a toll on our people. So our managers are cued in to make sure that they can tell when people are starting to get burned out. We force people to go on mandatory vacation, and they can make a lot of money during a disaster event because they're on call a lot, so we'll force them out. We have trained therapists that they can talk to if they have problems, and so we really do try to monitor that, because that's an important point.
How long have we had the, we are farmers, dun, 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 dun. How long has that been around now?
I want to say that has been around, I've been CEO 7 years, I would say 8 years. And I'll tell a funny story. When that first came in, so the CEO before me and I was on his management team, they brought that in and they did the little jingle, and we hated it. Absolutely hated it. And this is before we saw J.K. Simmons, and luckily the marketing person, I'll give him credit, and his head will even get a little bit bigger, a guy by the name of Mike Linton said, you guys hired me to be the professional, you're not, and let us at least try this. And so we reluctantly allowed him to try it, and it was probably the best decision we ever made.
And when you saw J.K. Simmons the first time, what was your words like? Oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, maybe a little bit better than that. But it's interesting because we're going through, from a marketing perspective, our demographics are starting to change, and he was the perfect target for. We had a section of baby boomers that we called confident planners, and he was perfect. And now as we're starting to market much more to millennials, and we have a target segment in there we call up and comers. One of our worries was that he wasn't going to translate well generationally, and we're finding that's absolutely not true. So he's kind of spanning the generations as well. We sponsored the PGA Tour in Torrey Pines at San Diego, and we sort of lucked into that because it was during the financial crisis, and it used to be the Buick Open, and GM left, and we got it 10 days before the start of that tournament. Would have been, I guess, 10 years ago. 10 years ago this year, and it wasn't quite as good as it is today, but we actually got it, and it's worked incredibly well for our brand. We've got Ricky Fowler as our ambassador, and he connects with everybody. He's fantastic, and so I think it does work, and it's really become a great agent motivation tool because we use it to bring our best agents to the event as well.
Which also makes me think of Farmers Field, which did not go. So, I mean, you sort of make these decisions of how much do you want to be in sports or whatever event, and how much, again, how do you weigh that?
So I could say one of the mistakes I didn't make would have been Farmers Field. That happened right before I became CEO. And I think when you do naming rights for a stadium, I think you do it for one of two reasons. One is there is an obligation to give back to the community, and you want to help the local sports team. And the other one is you're a company that needs name recognition. Well, we really don't need name recognition, and that would have been, had we actually done that, about 10% of our, at the time, and close to that now, 10% of our marketing budget would have been just to name the football field. So I was very, very thankful that did not go forward.
Jeff, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.